Hello, friends. Recently, I've been talking about the newly discovered Yamas that we generally aren't familiar with because they are above and beyond the 5 Yamas or restraints in thought, word, and action that are listed by Patanjali, the ancient exponent of yoga. These extra yamas and niyamas, the niyamas are the things that we try to cultivate in ourselves rather than restraining. These extra ones appear in very ancient texts, and they're the texts like the Upanishads that Patanjali drew from, and he was streamlining the process of yoga. He created the 8-fold path of yoga, the 8-limbed path, and yamas and niyamas are the first 2 of those steps of yoga. But these extra yamas and niyamas I have just delighted in. I found them very fascinating. And they round out the spiritual path in a way that is very helpful. And I hope you also are enjoying hearing about them. So far, we have talked about Arjava, which means non-hypocrisy or sincerity. Driti, which means not giving up, perseverance in reaching the goal, going for God, in other words. Kshama, which is, in this context, non-aggravation during suffering, which I find very fascinating. Patience and forgiveness are the positive aspects of that. And the other one is Daya, which we know as kindness and compassion. And in this context, it means non-prejudgment, not condemning others, but having compassion for all, in all circumstances. And this last one, the ancient texts list 10, and so these 5 are the new ones, new to me, and this last one is Mitahara, which means non-excess or measured diet. And I just thought that was wonderful because we can't exclude our physical reality from our spiritual reality. The physical has a tremendous impact on the spiritual. And so it's important that we take the time to really analyze our diet. And as Yogananda said, we should have a diet that is proper Etarianism, a simple diet that suits our own personal constitution. And as a culture, America is having a very hard time physically. I read an article that Dharmadas had found saying that the American diet is killing the American people. And it quoted some very interesting statistics. For one thing, it said that before World War II, about 40% of new recruits into the armed forces were disqualified because they were malnourished and underweight. You know, if you think about just coming up from the Depression, it's very reasonable that so many people were malnourished and underweight. Well, this article also said that currently 70% of people between the age of 17 and 24 are not qualified for the armed forces because they are malnourished and overweight. It also said that almost 3 out of 4 people in America are overweight or obese. That's staggering. And it's also, in fact, we were reading another article about health, just saying that it's practically a national security concern that the health of so many people in America is so compromised. The previous article about the American diet is killing the American people said that half the people in America have diabetes or are pre-diabetic. So we are in trouble as a nation, and perhaps part of the reason why the virus has hit us so hard is that we have so many underlying health issues. I read a very interesting book which I recommend called The Pleasure Trap, and it talks about how human beings are conditioned to like and go for very highly caloric foods. They're conditioned to go for salt, oil, and sugar. These are the things we love. And the trouble is that in our modern era, we can find all of those things at the gas station, the little 7-Eleven or any convenience store. The supermarkets are just stocked full of all of those things. High calorie food, salt, oil, and sugar in abundance. But the trouble is our ancestors who gave us these drives could only find those things very rarely. And so whenever they came across them, they wanted them, and they stocked up while they could get it, which wasn't very often. And so these days, we have 2 or 3 times the amount of sodium in our bodies than we need. And that comes from processed foods. At the same time, we have very little potassium. We have 3 or 4 times less potassium than we should have. And we get potassium from fresh fruits and vegetables. So this combination leads to lots of health challenges, high blood pressure and inflammation. And inflammation is the cause of a lot of disease. So I tell you all these things because we need to watch our diets. We need to take care of ourselves and not just eat for comfort or emotional release or relaxation. And these things are normal, especially in the stressful times that we live in. I have to guard it myself. I want entertainment, and so I think about what I can eat. And that's not the right thing to do. We need to find our entertainment by chanting, by watching videos that are inspiring, or doing things like reading the scriptures that lift our consciousness. If we try to find our happiness through food, it's going to make us unhappy. I'm reminded of Yogananda saying that under every rose bush of pleasure hides a rattlesnake of pain. So we look for the quick and the easy solution. We grab the chips, we grab the cookies, we grab the soft drinks, and we're looking for that rush, that sugar hit, but ultimately it does not serve us. And so Mitahara is all about measuring our diet so that we control. Yama is all about control, restraining thought, word, and action that does not serve us, that leads to negative karma, that leads to unhappiness, that weighs us down, literally and figuratively. And so this is very important in our lives to control these impulses. In the last few years, Dharmadas and I have, just in the last couple of years, really, 2.5 years, we each have lost a lot of weight. I've lost about 25 pounds. He's lost about 40 pounds. And we did it because our health was suffering. And we could see that so much of our pain was just from carrying around an extra couple of suitcases with us wherever we went. And so we were able to lose this weight by fasting and primarily by becoming vegan. We had been vegetarian for most of our adult lives, but becoming vegan was a big step, and fortunately, it was not hard at all. We had eggs and milk products were such a big part of our diet, but we just dropped them and never looked back. Occasionally we have an egg and banana bread or something like that, but even that we've let go of, and we're using flax eggs now, egg substitute. So it is possible, and it is extremely helpful. We've felt a lot better by doing it. So maybe that's not for everyone, but it's just something to share that we have been able to do as a positive change in our lives. Watching the excess, using Mitahara in all kinds of ways is also very helpful. What I've started doing is measuring the amount of time that I spend on screens. I watch how much I look at the news and do emails and projects on the computer and on my phone, because it's just not good for my brain, it's not good for my eyes. And so I've controlled that amount of time that I spend on the screen, and I found that spiritually very, very helpful. Controlling the amount of exercise that we get too, and we rarely get too much, but it's good not to overexert. But for example, I try to really make an effort every day to move a little bit. Every hour we go for long walks, 2.5 miles or 3 miles every day, so that we're just moving and keeping the body fit for God realization, as Yogananda told Swami. It's very important to do that. Another thing is to be very aware of the influences that you have. If you have negative people in your life, try to limit the exposure that you have to them. Try to keep positive influences foremost. Watch your mental diet as well as your physical diet. So, what are you putting into your mind? How many murder mysteries do we need? How much murder and mayhem do we want to talk about or live in or watch on television? It reminds me of a story that Swami would tell, that when he was in college, there was a big poster that was on the bulletin board, and it said, "Murder, mayhem," and in big bold letters, and then underneath, "Now that we have your attention, this is the French Club, and we are recruiting new members." So there is that draw. The human mind has a certain delight in intensity and drama. But how much do you really want in your nervous system? How much more delightful and sattvic, meaning a high vibration, to have a tranquil life, to live in peace and calmness, and to find your joy in meditation, in service. These are sattvic qualities, and not everyone is ready for it. Sometimes we need to play games and have fun and play racquetball and pickleball and canasta and do fun things. I sometimes just have to do crafts. It's just like, okay, nothing else will do. I have to paint something or just create something. And recently it's very funny because I found an old clay flower pot out in the garden that nobody seemed to want. And it was chipped and beat up, but it wasn't cracked. And so I brought it in and cleaned it up and painted it and decorated it and just got into that zone of creative energy. And it's only a flower pot, but it gave me that joy of just creativity. So when we think of Mitahara, let's think of not getting into excess, eating what we need. We need a surprisingly small amount of food. We really try, Dharmadas and I, to do 2 meals a day, breakfast and a late lunch. If we get hungry in the late afternoon, we try not to eat after 5 o'clock, but we'll have a small bit of something. But just trying to stay within that discipline is very important. As Sri Yukteswar said, sometimes you need to throw the dog a bone. Sometimes you need to go off your diet and have something really fun. But generally, try just to live more in the spine, even when it comes to food. To try to be a little bit disciplined. I have a dear friend named Suman from India. She lives in Canada now, and she told me when we first came to India in the early 2000s, she said, "You Americans, it's okay to have a nice house and have nice furniture And she herself had a beautiful flat with her family, very nice pieces of furniture, very tasteful, very well appointed house. And she said, it's good to have that. But then you Americans, you just keep going and going and going. And I know what she means. I remember some friends and I and Dharmadas stayed in a rental house by the ocean a few years ago. And it was a beautiful house, just beautiful. But it was so over-decorated. Every place, everywhere you looked, it was all fluffed out, all frou-froued to the max. And it was so overdone that there was nowhere to put my toothbrush in the bathroom. There was just no space for any other object to be in the house. And that's typical of American houses. There's hardly room to live in them. There's so much stuff. So let us practice Mitahara. At least meditate on the concept and think about Master saying simple living and high thinking. That's the way to live. To live more in God's joy, to need less and less. So much of the processed food, the dairy, the all of that sort of stuff, so much of it contains chemicals that are addicting, which is part of why we crave them so much. Part of why we want that stuff is that there are chemicals that are in it that make us do that. And I don't know about you, but I don't like that thought of anyone forcing me sort of against my will to want something and become addicted to it. So let's try to eat more and more clean food and to live so that our thoughts and our actions are clean and our minds become purified, our bodies become healthier, and we are fit for God realization. God bless you.